December 20th, 1943. Over the frozen skies of northern Germany, a single American B-17 bomber, nicknamed Ye Olde Pub, was barely holding itself together. The aircraft had been torn apart by flak and German fighters. One engine was gone. The tail was shredded. Blood covered the fuselage. Inside, 10 young men were fighting to keep both the plane and themselves alive. The mission had been simple: bomb a factory near Bremen, then return to base in England. But war has a way of turning missions into nightmares. After completing the bombing run, Ye Olde Pub was hit repeatedly by anti-aircraft fire. Its nose was blown open, the oxygen system failed, the tail gunner was dead, and most of the crew were wounded. Holes the size of fists and dinner plates lined the fuselage. The plane was losing altitude fast. Somehow, 21-year-old Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, flying his first combat mission, was still at the controls. Then, out of the gray winter sky, came the silhouette that every bomber feared. A German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter. The crew braced for the end. They had no working guns left, no escort, no hope. The German fighter closed in. Inside that cockpit was 27-year-old Franz Stigler, an experienced Luftwaffe pilot credited with nearly 30 victories. One more kill would earn him the Knight's Cross, the highest military honor in Nazi Germany. The crippled B-17 was an easy target. A quick burst of gunfire, and Stigler could end it. But when Franz pulled alongside the bomber, what he saw stopped him cold. He could see into the gaping holes of the fuselage. Bloodied men slumped at their posts, some barely conscious. The tail was shredded. One gunner dead. Through the cockpit glass, he saw the young American pilot's pale, exhausted face, streaked with sweat and blood. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Franz's finger hovered over the trigger. And then something inside him changed. He remembered the words of his old commanding officer, Gustav Retold. "If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. You fight to protect, not to murder." To Franz, these men in the shattered bomber were no different than men hanging helpless in parachutes. Killing them would not be victory, it would be murder. So he made a decision that defied everything he'd been trained for. He eased his finger off the trigger, steadied his plane, and began flying alongside the dying bomber. Inside the Olde Pub, the Americans watched in disbelief. The enemy wasn't attacking. He was escorting them. Franz gestured for them to land in Germany, where they could receive medical care and become POWs. But Charlie shook his head. His orders were clear: make it back to England. So Franz did the unthinkable. He stayed by their side, flying formation to protect them from German flak batteries below. For nearly 10 minutes, the two planes, enemy and ally, flew wing to wing through enemy territory. And when they reached the edge of the North Sea, Franz raised his hand, saluted, and peeled away. Charlie and his crew made it home. 10 lives were spared that day. When Ye Olde Pub finally landed at RAF Seething, the ground crew was stunned. The bomber was so destroyed it should have fallen apart in midair. One man dead, the rest wounded, but alive. At the debriefing, Charlie told his commanding officers what had happened, the German who had escorted them to safety. The response was immediate. Never speak of this again. Not to your crew, not to anyone. If word spread that German pilots could show mercy, it might soften the resolve of Allied flyers. Compassion, they said, was dangerous. So Charlie stayed silent. He finished his combat tour, flew more missions, and returned home after the war. He built a life in West Virginia, went to college, rejoined the Air Force in 1949, and later worked as a Foreign Service officer in Laos and Vietnam. But the war never left him. His daughter would later recall hearing her father cry out in his sleep, waking from nightmares drenched in sweat. The sound of engines, flak bursting in the sky, the image of a German pilot staring at him through the frost-covered hut. The man who spared them haunted him for decades. On the other side of the world, Franz Stigler carried the same burden. After landing his Messerschmitt near Bremen that day, he told no one what he had done. Sparing an enemy was a court-martial offense in Nazi Germany. If anyone discovered that he had deliberately let Americans escape, he'd face a firing squad. So Franz buried the memory. He survived the war, barely. He saw Germany collapse, his comrades killed, his brother lost in combat. By 1953, disillusioned with what his country had become, he immigrated to Canada. There, he rebuilt his life as a businessman. He married, worked hard, and stayed quiet. But the memory of that bomber, the faces inside, the salute at the end, never faded. He later said that after that day, he lost his appetite for killing. He still flew missions, but something inside him had changed. 4 decades passed. 2 men living on opposite sides of the world, both haunted by the same 10 minutes in the sky. Then in 1986, fate stirred. Charlie Brown, now 64 years old, attended a reunion of combat pilots called Gathering of Eagles. During the event, someone asked if he had any memorable missions. For the first time in 43 years, Charlie told the story of the German fighter who spared them. When he finished, the room fell silent. Then someone asked, "Did you ever try to find that pilot?" Charlie realized he hadn't, but now he had to. He started writing letters to the U.S. Air Force, to the German government, to veteran organizations. He combed through archives, old records, anything that might identify a Luftwaffe pilot near Bremen on December 20th, 1943. Months turned into years. Dead ends, lost documents, incomplete files. But Charlie refused to give up. By 1989, he was desperate. He wrote a detailed letter describing the encounter and sent it to a newsletter for combat pilots, read by both American and German veterans. He included every detail: the date, the location, the markings on the German plane, and that unforgettable salute before parting ways. Then he waited. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, Canada, 74-year-old Franz Stigler sat in his home reading that very newsletter. When he saw the letter from a U.S. pilot describing a December 1943 encounter over Germany, his heart stopped. The details matched exactly. For the first time in 47 years, Franz knew the crew had survived. He sat down and wrote a short letter. It began with 4 words: "I was the one." When Charlie opened that envelope in January 1990, he trembled. After nearly half a century, the mystery was over. The man who had spared them was alive. They spoke on the phone. Franz described the mission, his aircraft, his commander's warning, the salute. Every word confirmed what Charlie already knew. They had found each other. 6 months later, they met in person in Seattle. Cameras captured the moment. Franz stepped from a car, saw Charlie across the tarmac, and broke into a run. The 2 men embraced and wept. "I love you, Charlie," Franz whispered. They spent hours talking, filling in the missing decades. Charlie introduced Franz to surviving members of his crew, to their children and grandchildren, families that existed because Franz had chosen mercy. The nightmares that had haunted Charlie for 40 years vanished. Franz said it was the only good thing that came from the war: brothers. They called each other every week, traveled together to air shows, schools, and veterans gatherings, sharing their story of compassion in combat. At one visit, Franz handed Charlie a book. Inside, he'd written, "In 1940, I lost my only brother as a night fighter. Thanks, Charlie, your brother Franz." Their families grew close. Charlie's wife and Franz's wife became friends. They spent holidays together, laughing like old comrades. Some people didn't understand. Franz received hate mail. Some called him a traitor, others a Nazi, but he didn't care. They would never understand, he said. For Franz and Charlie, nationality no longer mattered. Enemy, ally, German, American. Those were just words. What mattered was humanity. The friendship lasted 18 years. On March 22, 2008, Franz Stigler died in Vancouver at the age of 92. 8 months later, on November 24, 2008, Charlie Brown passed away in Miami at 86. They are buried thousands of miles apart, but their story remains forever linked. 2 men, one brief encounter in the chaos of war, and a bond that outlasted nations. Their story became a book, a higher call, reaching millions around the world. But the true legacy isn't in the pages, it's in the lesson they left behind, that even in war, humanity can survive. Franz Stigler once said, "You can't always choose your uniform, but you can always choose your humanity." 47 years to find each other, 18 years as brothers, and one act of mercy that changed 2 lives and countless hearts forever.